All right, go ahead, Chris.
Okay, so in the first line where it says Christine Gray Mullen and then problems with the equipment, I just added the word had delayed the opening of the meeting. Down at the bottom of the first page where it says Mr. Liu presented changes, including a revised parking management plan, I added the word "and" before a site plan change. On the second page, after the description of all the different parking spaces and who they were assigned to, this paragraph that says 3.5 units will be eliminated and they will become exercise space for tenants, and then 1.5 units will be, and I added the words eliminated and designated for indoor bicycle parking, and part of, instead of it, I put this area will become a mechanical room.
Maria, we're on the October 17th. There were 2 emails that went out, a draft, and then Christine sent out a more final one today. She's telling us what the changes were between the 2.
At the bottom of what was page 4, it talks about Mr. Levenstein summarized that the board seems to be at an impasse, and I made a mistake and I wrote, the town needs parking. And I'm sure he might agree with that, but actually what he said was the town needs housing. So I changed the word parking to housing. At the beginning of the section that talks about conditions, I added the word draft conditions because that was something Ms. McGowan had brought up last time, and they're not really conditions until the board votes on them. Under conditions, under condition number 3, I think the numbering of these were not appropriate, but whatever. Anyway, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it goes back to 3 again. But the one that says, upon a change of ownership, I crossed out, or if the property is no longer managed by blank, because we don't know who it's managed by. So that phrase has been deleted. I tried to fix all of the numbering, but I'm going to go back and change, make sure that that is really taken care of. Condition number 15, I realized was redundant, so I took that out. And then I added findings for your special permit. You had gone through some discussion about why you were able to grant the special permit, and you needed to tie the findings into footnote A of Table 3. So I added findings in the new version of the minutes. They were referred to in the old version, but I made them more explicit. I said the board found under Section 6 dimensional regulations, table. Oh,
Sorry,
well, in the new version on page 6, in the middle of the page, right after the findings under 11.24. Are you on the?
Yep.
Okay, so Ms. McGowan, you might want to look at the new version of page 6. Are you there? Yeah. So I wrote, the board found under Section 6, Dimensional Regulations, Table 3, footnote A of the zoning bylaw, special permit for modification of setbacks. And then I reiterated some of the things that you talked about during the meeting. Number 1, after reviewing a map of the East Amherst Village Center, the board noted that there are other buildings in the village center that are close to their side setbacks. There wasn't much discussion about that. That was just something that I pointed out to you. And then previously you had said the front setback of 3 feet is proposed against a wide public way, so the smaller setback makes sense in that location. There will be approximately 40 feet of green space in front of the building. And then number 3, on the north side, the difference between the requirement of 10 feet and the proposed setback of 6 feet is only 4 feet. The Florence Bank building will be relatively far from the new building, according to architect Roy Brown, and the distance will be about 76 feet from building to building. And then the last one was, the bank has a green lawn on the other side of the property line with a fence that is set back from the property line, and therefore the setback of 6 feet will be set against a green lawn. So those were all things that you said during the public hearing, and I felt that it was important to list those as findings for your reasons why you were able to grant the special permit for modification of setbacks. And everything else is just as it was in the version that I sent out 2 days ago.
Does anyone have any additional changes or comments to the October 17th minutes?
I'm not sure where this is, but because the numbering is different. I thought you should have, in the finding about recreational facilities, I think you could add in the indoor workout space, but I'm not sure where that would be. And then I was wondering if you were going to address the issue of that was raised about parking in adjacent properties somewhere, in terms of like nuisance or effects on neighborhoods, but neighbors and stuff. But since that was raised by Florence Bank, but
Where is that, Janet?
I'm a little. It's hard for me to go from 2 to thing.
So I think Mr.
11.2401. Oh, and 11.2402.
And what did you want it changed?
It talks about detrimental impacts, and there's no talk about the parking issue in other people's lots. And see, that was raised by the abutters.
But we don't know if it will be a problem.
So
But you might want to address it.
it is mentioned in the public hearing testimony from previous nights. I think it was mentioned on the 2nd of October, so it would be in those minutes. So those minutes are going to be incorporated into the final decision, but they weren't really part of the discussion on October 17th, and I didn't think it was, abutting properties are going to be protected because the applicant is going to manage his parking. So I didn't think it was relevant to this particular finding.
So, in terms of the minutes of the discussion, and I'm going to use my old draft, which I'm sorry about that, going back and forth. When on page 2 it says, Mr. Liu explained the following proposal with regard to the number of units and number of parking spaces. I think that it needs a bullet saying that 12 tenants will not be allowed a parking space, and this will be in their lease, and the rents will be reduced, because that was part of the parking plan. And then in terms of on page 2, it says, Ms. McGowan stated that, my remarks, I wanted to, so it says, Ms. McGowan stated that rather than the number of spaces, the applicant should make sure there are enough parking spaces. I'm on page 2 of the old one.
So after the bullets.
Yeah, and this is so different. So I was hoping that you would add the photos of, that I provided of is it Crescent Ridge? That I had, Spruce Ridge, thank you. And then just include that into the minutes that I showed photos showing that was more than 2 spaces are being used, and also the number of units at Kendrick Park, Kendrick Place, and 1 East Pleasant, the number of parking permits they've applied for, and then they have 34 on site, just that it was about 1 parking space per unit.
Send me the exact wording of
that's
what
what
you
I was
want me
thinking.
to
It might
put
be
in there.
easier to send these changes in because they're sort of longer. And then on the discussion about people's driving habits, I remember making a comment that there's no evidence about, how, basically that the building's going to be rented out to people of all ages, and there's not any evidence in the record about the use of cars by people. There's just there's sort of speculation about it, but people don't really, there's not in the record data about who, rental units in the area using cars and things like that, so.
Really clear on exactly what,
So I had down, Mrs. McGowan noticed that there was no evidence in the record on the car use of potential tenants since the building will be rented out to people of all ages with partners and potential partners and children. I had raised the issue of what will happen if somebody has a job or a life change that requires a car, would they have to move out? And that people don't really bike in the winter, when it's dark and cold, and that the bus system is good for UMass and Northampton, but not really anywhere else.
so you'll send me that wording as well?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I just want to note that I'm trying not to make this a transcript. I try to get as much into it as I can, but it's not an exact transcript of what people said. So if you send me your comments, I'll incorporate them.
Are we supposed to approve these today, or can we roll this with the other ones to the next meeting?
I would appreciate hearing what Ms. McGowan has to say so that I can incorporate it into the decisions. So if she has more comments,
And then I would just put in the discussion we had about what would happen if there were people in the Florence parking lot, like what's the system that the Florence Bank would have to go through. That's it.
you'll send me those as quotes.
Yes, I could do that.
Okay. Is the board comfortable with those changes or not?
Yes. Do I
Oh,
hear a
may
motion?
I move to approve the October 17 minutes provisionally with the suggestions that Janet made, that Chris will incorporate, and there, is that?
I second.
Any more discussion? All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, unanimous. Great. Okay, so we'll move on now to the public hearings. We're past 7:05, so we'll start with, I have a preamble here. SPR 2020-03, Jonathan Graffine, Riverside Organics, 555 Belchertown Road. In accordance with the provisions of MGL Chapter 40A, this public hearing has been duly advertised and notice thereof has been posted. This hearing is being held for the purpose of providing an opportunity for interested citizens to be heard regarding SPR 2020-03, Jonathan Graffine, Riverside Organics, 555 Belchertown Road. This request site plan review, approval to construct and operate a marijuana product manufacturer and marijuana micro business under section 3.363.5 of the zoning bylaw, map 18D, parcel 2, PRP zoning district. Are there any board disclosures? I don't see any, so we'll move on to the applicant's presentation. So welcome. If you could please both introduce yourselves and, Chris, make sure the mics are on.
Okay.
It looks like you're queued up on the computer.
Good evening. My name is Jonathan Gerfine. I'm the owner and operator of Riverside Organics, 555 Belchertown Road in Amherst.
Good evening. My name is Eric Taub. I am a part of RAV and Associates out of Needham, and I'm here with Mr. Gerfine.
Welcome. So you have a presentation for us?
Yes, a brief one. I'm going to be reviewing and discussing all the different aspects of the operation, exterior and interior, hours of operation, security, etc. So let me just start with where the cursor is at the top of the screen is where Belchertown Road is, Route 9. There's an entrance on Hall Road where Valley Medical Center is. So basically, there is a small private road right here leading to the property. This road will be partially blocked off with concrete blocks, which was okayed by DPW just to deter any persons from entering the area of the facility. The facility will be gated with a 6-foot tall gate, which I am hoping to make the front of an ornamental gate to make it a little more aesthetically pleasing. There will be parking right outside of the gate at the end of the private road. There will also be parking inside the gated area for employees. The parking outside the gated area will basically be for visitors, CCC, and state or town officials. There will be a full security system installed by an S-Class licensed professional security installer that has done many security cannabis facilities around the state. He's familiar with all the necessary parameters and requirements that the state and the CCC is looking for. We've met with Chief Livingstone twice, once at the site, once in his office, to discuss these issues. He's satisfied that we're on the right path to install and construct a secure facility. He will be included and part of the process as we go, making sure that all the security parameters are covered, and he will come down there and make a site visit with some of his subordinates when the time is deemed appropriate. The hours of operation will fluctuate, because obviously in the beginning of any operation, the hours are going to be longer than once the operation is established. So the hours of operation now, I'm assuming, will be something like 7 or 8 in the morning to about 7 or 8 at night. There will be this is a micro operation. This will only be 1 or 2 employees aside from myself. And just to actually clarify back, which I believe Ms. Brestrup had sent a note out the other day, this will only be a product manufacturing marijuana facility. This will not be a extract or product derivatives of cannabis. This will be strictly a grow. That is all that Amherst is allowing under their bylaws, under the CCC definitions of micro businesses under a certain square footage, which in this case is under 5,000 square feet. So there will be a standard operating procedure for bringing people onto the premises in relation to security, making sure that the persons coming onto the premises are of age and are there for appropriate reasons. This will not be a public access facility. This facility will be only open to employees, CCC, town officials, town police, or any persons appropriate in that regard. There will be no visitors. There will be no solicitation accepted from the front gate or anything of that matter. Let's see. There will be street lights posted on 3 different areas of the property affixed with security cameras and street lights, which will go off at a set time according to whatever the town dictates in the evening. These lights will be downward facing and will not bother the neighbors, even though there are limited neighbors in view of these lights. The cameras are infrared. They'll be obviously on 24 hours a day. There will be full 360 view of the property, interior and exterior. Let's see. All the transactions will be done inside of the facility, and I will get to that as I proceed to the interior pictures. Finishing with the exterior, there will be an electric gate which myself or employees will have access to as for ease of entry and for security in the front of the property, in the entrance coming off of the street. There will be a garbage bin on the premises for refuse. There will be a tight tank for humidity and runoff coming from the greenhouse. There will be a cistern with rain recovery from all the gutters connected from the house as to be more conserving on water. There's a tentative compost pile in the rear in the fenced-in area for soil only, not for any type of green matter or cannabis product. There's also a tentative compost pile designed in front of the visitor parking outside of the fenced-in area. Again, this will only be for soil material and nothing of any cannabis substance or matter. There is a proposed generator placement in the rear of the building, enough to suffice for sustaining the business in lieu of power outage. It's rated at 167 amperage and 48,000 watts, which should be more than enough for this facility. There is also a proposed propane tank next to it. All the parameters and setbacks from the fire department have been checked, and I've been in touch with the fire department in regard to size, entrance regulations on the gates, doors, and any other parameters that the fire department may have. There will also be a lockbox on the outer gate for the fire department to enter the facility in lieu of fire. There will also be a key on the building itself that is also required to code and I believe state law, which also will have a key to enter the facility. The fire department, via Mr. Mike Roy, will come and make a site visit and do all the appropriate inspections at the appropriate designated time. The greenhouse, the proposed greenhouse is a steel-sided structure which will be secure and just as difficult to penetrate as any building or house. I've also gone over the specifications in a vague manner with the police chief, and he's also seems to feel that it will be sufficiently secure. And again, he will come and make a site inspection with his subordinates at the designated appropriate time. Electricity is provided by Eversource, which comes off of Hall Drive. It is a three-phase, 120-208, the same capacity that the generator is rated at. I'm now going to switch over to our next page. Okay, so in this diagram, this shows the entrance room, excuse me, let me go back to, I'm sorry. I just want to depict where the entrance is on the site plan itself. Okay, so coming into the facility, the entrance will be, there will be a passageway on the side of the greenhouse to a door which is located right where the red cursor is, which I can do on the other side for the town officers. The entrance will be right there. And the passage is right there, as many of you know as you've visited the site recently. Okay, I'm now going to go back to the interior pages. So this room right here is the entrance. This denotes the entrance door. There'll be an air curtain, a bug killer, and various other machinery to control bugs and dirt and to keep that room sterile. That is basically an entrance room to come into the facility, to change your shoes, which will be provided to all entrants. There'll be rubber, washable, reusable shoes to use to enter the facility as to eliminate contamination. There'll be a small hand washing station in there with towels. There'll also be new hazmat suits, fresh and new, to be used by all entrants, as again to prevent contamination to the facility, as contamination of mold and mildew and other bacteria are one of the biggest problems in these facilities. So once entering this facility, this room will also be used as a transaction room. The delivery personnel from the designated companies that are hired to come and deliver or come pick up product, the transactions will be done in this room. The money will be counted, the product will be weighed, and obviously every room in this facility will have cameras and motion detectors, smoke alarm, fire exits, emergency lights, etc., as according to code and required. So after coming to this room here and going through the sterilization and changing shoes and cleaning up, entrance through another door into the facility, these rooms here are basically just open work areas, prep areas for bags and soil, reverse osmosis to clean the water before entering into the greenhouse. This door right here is the proposed door entering into the vestibule, which will go into the greenhouse. If you proceed through, this is the lower floor of the house, by the way. If you proceed through, there is a utility room for a water heater. There is a women's bathroom and a men's bathroom already existing. This room down here is a proposed drying, curing room for the cannabis, which takes anywhere from 7 days to 2 weeks, depending on the strain and the humidity content, the moisture content. This room will be affixed with dehumidifiers, fans, lights, and heat as needed appropriately. Again, all rooms and hallways will have appropriate security and fire and exit light failure lights affixed in them as required by code. This is the upper floor. The upper floor will have a vegetative room for clones, mothers, and for plants before they are brought into the greenhouse. There is another open work area here, which will be for trimming and manicuring and cleaning up of the product before sent off to testing and packaged for sale. There is an office here just for general use. There is a 650-pound safe, which is sufficient to house any product for this size facility in the open work area, trimming area, right outside the office where the trimming and manicuring processing will be done. There is a utility room at the end of the upper first floor where all electrical housing and security hardware will be furnished. There are the doors that were original to the house have been affixed with 12-point locking high tensile steel security doors, double-sided cylinders. The doors will all be operational for safety of security in case of or needed for any use, whether functional or security. The doors are generally not going to be used for sterility reasons because the entrance and exit should only be done through the sterility room for the obvious reasons of keeping the facility clean. These doors are and all will be affixed with cameras 24 hours a day with night vision, high resolution as required by code. As I said, they will be functional. They will not be used unless necessary. This is the upper floor. This is the existing original front door in the vegetative room. Again, this will not be used. This door will not be used, however functional. This is a rear door to the outer part of the house and the property. Again, this door is functional, however, will not be used unless necessary. Inside of the vegetative room, the drying room, there will be dehumidifiers as it is necessary to control humidity levels in this type of environment. Controlling humidity, pathogens, and moisture is very important. As much of the water as I can recover and recycle from the dehumidifiers, interior, and as well as rainwater, I'm planning on recovering and cleaning with the reverse osmosis system. Again, on the lower floor where the entrance is to the sterility room, this will be used as the main entrance. This is on the ground floor, just to reiterate so everyone's clear on where we are. This other door here will be used, there will be a vestibule entering into the greenhouse. There will be air curtains. It's a machine that, if no one is familiar, which will be blowing air downward and outward. A, coming into the sterility room, and B, going from the main house and the open prep area into the greenhouse. There will also be another air curtain as to prevent contamination from bugs or any other pathogens, mold or mildew. The greenhouse will be affixed with only 14 LED lights. My main goal is to be as efficient as possible in relation to electricity and water usage. This operation is designated and will be an OMRI, organic grow operation. There will be no toxic, poisonous pesticides, chemicals, synthetic fertilizers, or any hydroponic processing at this facility whatsoever. There will be dehumidifiers, fans, a propane heater, air conditioners, and all the necessary standard parameters that all grow operations have throughout the state and the rest of the country. All of these systems are UL regulated and approved and tested. There will be HEPA filters on the intake louvers as to clean and prevent any pathogens, mold or mildew from coming into the facility. There will also be to eliminate and eradicate smell so as not to bother any neighbors of the surrounding neighborhood. There are massive activated carbon filters, which I have custom ordered, which will be affixed into the greenhouse, which should eliminate any smell to the surrounding area. The noise, there really should not be any noise issues or concerns coming out of this facility. There will be an exhaust fan which will be set on an humidity and heat temperature gauge. This will come on as needed according to the automatic system. Again, these fans should not create a nuisance in relation to noise. I have also purchased speed regulators to control the speed of these fans in case they are too noisy at a higher speed, and they can be turned down as to rectify any complaints of that type from any neighbors if there should be so. This is an architectural drawing done by Kuhn Riddle of the proposed site buildings when they're done. This structure on the left is the existing house now in its exact shape, form, and colors. The building on the right is the proposed greenhouse. I am hoping to make it into the same colors as to match and have a uniformity, nice look for the site. The lower picture is just a side view of the exhaust louvers as it would look. I believe that is from a north, if I'm not mistaken, north picture. This picture here is the structure itself. If you notice, on the facing picture, there is a corrugated steel wall. I have special custom ordered these same steel walls to be on the side as to make this facility secure. There will not be a large bay door like this. There will only be a small walk-in door, not from the outside. The only entrance will be from the main processing house. An exterior exit door is not required to code in Amherst for this size structure. These exhaust fans on the lower will not be here. I will have 2 exhaust fans in the upper and middle section of the building. Again, there will be steel where you see polycarbonate on the side walls here. I will have steel walls. I believe they're 8 or 10 feet high. And I've been made aware by the company that constructs these units that it is just as hard to get into the polycarbonate as it would be a steel wall. Chris, were there any other issues that I didn't cover that you might be aware of?
The board has a development application report that covers a lot of the issues, many of which you've covered already, but they may have questions based on that report.
I see there are 4 waivers requested, a landscape plan, a soil erosion plan, and a site plan, a sign plan, and a traffic impact statement. Thank you. A bunch, I think all of us were at the site visit that happened earlier this week. Is there one of the board members who would like to give a summary of the site visit? And don't all volunteer at once. So they're acting busy, so they're like putting it on you too.
No, I don't want to play a game. I want to approve the report.
I'll give it a shot. As John explained, I think everything was accurate. There's an existing building. There's a paved area to the west of it, where the footprint for the planned greenhouse will be. We saw the lay of the land surrounding the building. There were, we viewed the wetland to the west that was off the parking lot. Looked like a fence, auger holes had been advanced for the fence that was planned. We viewed the, abutting properties, which were, nothing was developed, in the immediate area, except the property to the south, which is, I think, we've got a letter from, what's the gentleman's name? Hall. Yeah, Mr. Hall. Anyway, that's where it looked like there's a radio tower on there, and also a very small log shed without a roof. And then we did an interior tour. Again, this was more just informational purposes for us because we were curious. And again, John was very thorough in terms of saying how the building is going to be laid out. And is there anything else people want to add?
Thank you, Jack. I just want to add that it was Monday at 9 a.m. of this week. Anyone else want to add anything? No, I'm good. Yeah. Thank you, and thank you.
I'm sorry, excuse me, did you want me to address some of the issues for the waivers, or no?
We'll first take questions from the
Okay.
board, and it might come up with those. And we'll also have questions from the public. At this point, actually, we'll move to questions from the board. So if you want to answer after
Sure.
they're asked.
Sure.
So does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask about this? David, thank you.
How do you propose disposing of waste? I'm thinking of, for instance, there's going to be a lot of depleted soil, I imagine, that's going to quickly overwhelm a compost pile, I would think, or other waste, and including both waste from operations, but also then the marijuana or cannabis waste product. How is that going to be dealt with?
Well, what happens with the soil itself is that it kind of gets eaten up by the ground once you make a compost pile and start to work it into the ground. So the grass or surrounding vegetation, which I have on the property, I could use it just aside from the compost pile, because there's nothing in this soil but soil. There's no chemicals in it. So anything in the surrounding area will just eat it up because it's just soil. If I, into these areas. And as the plants are growing themselves, the plants actually eat a lot of the soil. So a full bucket won't be a full bucket going out. A lot of it turns into plant and root. However, if need be in the future, I could always figure something out with the soil, whether to give it to farmers or nurseries, whatever. It's perfectly good soil. It's just that in cannabis, for sterility reasons, and you don't want contamination, you have to be more careful, because it's not as simple as growing tomatoes or vegetables outside, things like that, because with cannabis, with a fruit, you can take it and wash it off. You can't just take cannabis and wash off, various bacteria and other things, So it's a different animal in production. But I'm not really too concerned about the soil and buildup of that nature. I would just work it into the soil, and I've worked a lot outdoors with soil and landscaping over the years in construction, and I see how the soil just kind of melts back into the earth, so to speak. If I come to the point where I feel I need to truck soil out or what have you, I'll deal with that as it comes. But I don't really see that is going to be a problem. I thought about looking into ways to sterilize the soil and reactivate it, whether by organic materials or throwing hydrated lime on it to sterilize it and recompost it and use it again. So as it is an issue, I'm not really concerned about it because it's something that's manageable and it's not like a toxic material, it's just clean soil. In relation to the marijuana byproducts, I would say today, with the extract productions, I'll be able to sell probably 80 to 90% of the cuttings and trimmings of the plant, because all of the plant today is not discarded like years ago, at least the stems and stalks and leaves. They're used with different solvents or manufacturing processes to extract CBD and THC. So there are many extract and product producers, which I am not, which I could also sell the, as you would say, the stems and the trimmings and all that too. I could sell that too.
And I also understand that any other remainder gets grinded up and thrown and disposed in the.
Well, right, I mean, yeah, I mean, anything, right, sorry, yeah, anything of that nature will be. The utmost care, you know, regardless of what any rules and regulations are, I have every intention on running a secure, safe, sterile facility that does everything by the book to the highest standards in every regard. Yes?
So can you finish your sentence? So the remainder is ground up and,
Well, it's either ground up and thrown in the waste or ground up and worked into the compost pile to make sure that it's really ground in. As far as I remember reading the CCC rules, anything of actual matter has to be, I think, in locked containers until it's taken away by a refuse company, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, we're in the process of also building another one in Holyoke. So what they're doing is probably similar. It gets shredded and mixed. I think there's a certain percentage, and disposed of through the dumps and the refuge service.
And I have nothing to do with that. That's just another project he's working on. I don't, this is the only cannabis project I'm
Correct.
involved in.
Maria?
I have a couple questions. One, so you have one soil compost inside the fenced area and one outside. Is there a reason why there's a
Just
differentiation?
because there's more area there that's dead area, which could be easily used.
It's not like there's a difference between what's in the two?
No.
Okay.
No.
The other one is, so you mentioned there's carbon filters for the exhaust fans, so to keep the smells down. Are those fans running continuously and?
No, those, they could be, but they're not. Those fans are for heat and humidity levels. If it gets too hot, I'm gonna be using air conditioners and dehumidifiers, but if the fans are for two reasons. The louvers on one side and fans on the other. It's for fresh air, obviously. I have HEPA filters on the louvers intake and carbon filters going out. One for sterilization in, one for smell going out. Those fans are going to be hooked up to the main computer system, which will run the whole greenhouse, which will come on and off depending on the humidity and heat levels. So no, they will not be 24 hours.
I have a question. If you, where your walkway is going to be,
Yes.
there's, I can't read what they are, but there's like two boxes.
Oh, okay, I know what those are.
One looks in the way of.
Right, no,
walkway.
that's actually underground, that's a tight tank. That is a tight tank for all the condensation and runoff and humidity condensation produced by the dehumidifiers, which the DEP has required either go into Amherst sewer or into a tight tank. Being that the sewer is so far away and there's too many issues, the town has recommended to me to apply for a tight tank only for the greenhouse. No waste from the bathrooms will go into the tight tank. The tight tank is only for water that comes off of the greenhouse. There is an existing septic which has to go through Title V and reinspection, et cetera, for the bathrooms and a sink or two from the house, which is already existing. But that box, there are two boxes there. The first one, which you're referring to, is that one. The white one is
Yep.
the tight tank, and the one which is dark gray is the waste disposal bin. So again, that there is the proposed tight tank underground, and that is a waste bin right under it.
Can you describe what the waste bin is, or
Well, just a standard, what is it, a 4 by,
dumpster?
I'm sorry, right, dumpster.
Okay,
right.
so, and is it like on wheels? So how would that go? Like, do you wheel it outside your gate? Like, how often does it? get
Yeah, that would be honestly, I haven't really determined that yet, because I don't really foresee that much waste from this facility.
Well, even like the coffee cups, like, you'll build trash.
Right, no, right, yes. No, I did not review that, but yes, I mean, I wrote in my application that I have to be determined what company I'm gonna use and how frequent. Because obviously, in a new business, I don't know how much
You would
waste.
let them in the gate, or they'd have a key, or?
No,
you
no,
would
no,
wheel it
I would
out?
schedule a specific time where I would
Okay.
bring the garbage out to them, or even bring it in my truck to whatever, the waste, the dump is right up the
It
street from.
is close,
Right,
yes.
so that's convenient.
Okay, so the waste bin is sitting next to the 2 parking spots, and the next square is underground.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
that's the space that you have for the walkway to the door.
Well, there is enough space there, as far as I know. There should be enough space with, it looks like there isn't in the picture, but from knowing the property, if there were 2 parking spaces and a dumpster, there would still be ample space to get by to go into the facility. If there isn't, obviously, I could always move the dumpster to some other area on the property. There's plenty of room.
Yeah, it's only that sometimes we ask for the dumpster to be hidden or behind a fence
Uh-huh.
or for a looks aesthetics thing.
Right,
Um, Where this is more of a greenhouse, industrial, commercial, we'll see what the board thinks. but
Right.
I just know you're in a tight spot there to,
Right. Well, there are other areas on the property. I mean, there's a lot of areas I could put it or place it, or, build some type of wall to make it more aesthetically pleasing, or whatever the town might require.
and I'll just add, my second question was, you have 5 parking spaces, just how you came about those 5 spaces and how you, like, who would be using them? Because I know you have pickups and I know you have employees.
Right. Pickup should probably not be more than once a week, I'm assuming. Obviously, that could change, but even with 2 a week, it shouldn't be a large amount of traffic. How I came up with these spots was just by the way everything was laid out. I didn't specifically design it that way. Obviously, I want parking spaces inside of the fenced-in area for security reasons. Like I said, when I drive up, I myself, an employee, for ease of not having to get out every time, and security, to be able to electronically go in, park inside in a gated secure area, and as well as to, be able to keep unwanted guests out. The parking spots outside of the fenced-in area, I just decided to put in there because it was on my property, it's a paved area, it's open space that's not being used, and inside the gated area, it's very tight once the fence goes up and everything is built and designed in place, there will only be limited amount of space for parking in the fenced-in area. If I wanted, I could probably squeeze in another parking spot or 2 inside the fenced area, but then I'd have to do more paving and excavating probably. which would change the topography and the rain runoff, which I don't want to do, and soil erosion. So it was really easiest and most logical to put the spots on the outside. Obviously, any deliveries, the truck or vehicle will come inside the fenced-in area for security reasons. But any visitors, such as town or CCC or police or whomever, that, want to visit the facility, I don't see why it should be a problem if they parked outside and, just either made an appointment, we're expecting them, or, contacted us through the exterior buzzing.
Okay. Does the board have any other questions? I saw Jack first, and then you're next. Go ahead, Jack.
I was just saying that, Christine, you had a point. It does look like the features in front of the greenhouse are crowding access to the existing structure anyway. And I'm not sure about the justification of the number of parking places, what is required. But perhaps, yeah, things need to move over to the west if there's not room. Of course, this plan isn't very readable, so perhaps we can get a little more detail of, things proximal to the building that I can't really read all that well.
No, I know, I hear what you're saying. Sometimes looking at the picture, and when I was reviewing it with Chris in the past as well, sometimes she would also have problems deciphering things because it does look cluttered, and there are so many different parameters to the property, topography, elevations, that things get a little messy. I assure you, and this is not trying to make light of what you're saying, I hear what you're saying. I totally do. I know the property. I live and breathe this property for the last 8 months or so. I know that if measured properly, because I've measured out everything to make sure it fits, I know that if, from here it seems like, well, there's no room there. I understand that. But if it was actually literally built, because I've measured it out, and Eric could probably confirm this, the spaces were there and there was a garbage disposal, there would be more than enough room to get by. Like I was telling Christine, if for some reason, the only issue there, the tight tank is underground, so that's not in the way. The white box, you see what I'm talking about? Here, I'll depict it on the screen in front of you. This white box here, that is a tight tank. That tight tank is probably going to be 1,500 gallons. That will be underground. So that will be collecting all the water from the greenhouse. And the box under it is the proposed dumpster. And that could always be moved to another location. But I honestly, knowing the property, knowing the measurements, I don't believe that it would need to be.
I also think that when we were doing the study of the site, we were looking at the square footage of the property, and there's an equation, and it gives you at least, I think we need at least either 4 or 5 parking spots for the site.
I think it was 3, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
I think it was 3, and I just added in the extra ones just for good measure, just so there is enough parking in case the CCC or town came with a few cars like you folks did the other day. There were about 7 or 8 cars, and on that little street, which is actually my private property, everyone was able to park. Obviously, I'm assuming in the future there's not going to be so many cars, but if there's 2 or 3, I'm hoping there'll be ample parking. That's all. And I made 5. It was only 3 was required. I made 5 just, like I said, just for good measure, so there would be enough in case of.
Janet, I just want to ask, did the building commissioner, has he looked for code for the walkways and the entrance and that?
And the building commissioner and I looked at the drawings. I won't say that we measured things, so I can have him look at the drawing more carefully. And
He would know, and the fire department, we haven't gotten
we haven't gotten a report from the
anything
fire
from them,
department,
too, so
no.
They would look at the
Yep.
safety issues and the width, so.
Yep, so I'll ask.
Those will have some reassurance. All right, thanks, Chris. Janet, I think you were
I have a couple of questions. So are the cameras and the outdoor lighting also tied to the generator? So if your power goes out,
Yes.
will they continue to work?
Yes. The security system itself has its own battery power backup, irregardless of any generator. And the battery backup on those security systems probably lasts for a few days. So the security system will work no matter what, generator or not.
So
gener-
that's inside and outside on the
Yes,
poles?
so, yes,
Okay.
so the cameras and security and fire system all have their own interior battery, so there will never be a power failure on the fire or security systems or cameras. To answer your question regarding the generator, yes, the generator will be hooked up to all of the systems that are needed, so
Including the outdoor lighting?
everything.
Okay. You said that you're going to meet the standards for all grow operators throughout the country, and what are those?
I'm sorry, say that again?
I heard you say at one point you were doing organics, and then you said you're going to meet the standards for all grow
Oh,
operators
no, I was
throughout the
giving a
country.
general, I maybe misunderstood what I was saying. I was saying that basically, I have every intention on, I forget which part of what you're saying. I have every intention on making this operation as safe and professional as possible. Any of the equipment, I think you might be referring to the equipment I was referring to. When I mentioned the equipment, all the equipment in the greenhouse and that I'm using in the whole operation are standard machineries and devices that the whole industry is using. There's nothing that I'm using that no one else in the industry is. I'm not using anything unique. So I'm basically saying that I'm using all the other products, machinery that everyone else is using. Nothing less, nothing more than, is the STP, standard temperature, pressure of, the industry, which everyone else is using, basically. That's all I was saying.
Thank you. I have a very small question. On the greenhouse, there is one door, like on the, you said that there's not a requirement for a door, but there is a door, so is that an exit door if employees had to get out quickly?
No.
They can't get out quickly? I mean, there's only one exit to the greenhouse?
There is only one entrance and exit from the main house. To get into the greenhouse, you must enter into the main house and go through the main house into the greenhouse. Now, I checked with Rob Morrow, and he said that it is not required, because of the size of the buildings, it is not required to have an exit door from the greenhouse. I also discussed this from fire, from building, and from police. And the chief is okay with not having a door, the fire is okay with not having a door, and Rob Morrow said it is not required to have a door. I thought about it for safety reasons. I think that the facility will be safe and secure enough, and that I don't believe that it will be needed as an exit. I only view it as a possible weak link in the chain as an entrance to the greenhouse. Plus, I would not want to have an entrance or exit from the greenhouse itself because of sterility reasons. Could one be put for exit only? I had thought about that. I still could do that. If the town deems that they want it, it's necessary, or for whatever reasons, I'm more than willing to do that. But for now, as far as fire, police, and building, they've told me it's not necessary, so I have not designated a door to exit from the greenhouse.
I'm asking about that just in the idea that there's a lot of lights in the greenhouse, and if there's a fire, there's machinery if there's a fire. And the only way out would be to go maybe towards the fire. So
Right.
It seems logical that you should be able to get out on the other side.
Right, I thought about that as well.
yeah.
I did think about that, for obviously security and safety is above everything else. I'm open to it. I did consider it myself from that aspect, and then I weighed the measures back and forth of thinking about it from, sterility and security and need. And like I said, for right now, I do not have it a door designated, but That's where I am right now with it, that's all.
The other question I have is about your fence. It's a 6-foot chain link fence. Is there any, like, in my heyday, that would be really easy for me to climb. Is it, and I might have to, if I had to do it, I probably could get over it. So is it just 6 feet, or is there some barbed wire?
The town has some guidelines. The town guidelines are 4 feet unless you get permission, especially on frontage. If you're in commercial, they usually, depending on where it's located, allow it, but they take it on a case-by-case basis, as far as I've read and I know. I've spoke.
Six.
On the 6, right. The 4 is allowed. You need, anything above 4, you need, in Amherst, you need permission, especially on frontage, as far as I remember. The police chief doesn't seem to have a problem with 6 feet. The town doesn't seem to have a problem with 6 feet. The town does not want barbed wire. They do not want it looking like a prison. I think that someone told me it's outlawed in Mass. I forget exactly if I'm correct or not. Like a fence could be driven through, cut through. There's it's really more of a deterrence from people just to openly walk into the property. It's basically saying, don't come in here. Look, if someone wants to get into these properties, they're going to, as soon as they jump the fence, they're going to be seen, and they'll be detected by motion detectors or cameras or motion lights or what have you. Security is always a concern. I don't think it's really going to be an issue of anyone.
And I have one quick question about lighting. So you only need lighting during when people are there, and so after 7 or 8, it'd be okay for it to be turned off for you? I'm just thinking in terms like you're next to a wetland, and that, outdoor lighting at night attracts bugs and wildlife, and it disrupts cycles and all that stuff. So you don't have a preference beyond your operating
I
hours?
was going to go with whatever the town told me. If they said we want it off at 11, we want it off at dusk, Obviously, you have to take into consideration the neighbors and light pollution. And they're all downward facing, they're all LED according to the new code in Massachusetts. Obviously, my first and foremost is not to bother my neighbors in that respect. And since we're on the issue of light, there is a light deprivation system required to code which is basically a big curtain that operates on a photocell, so when it gets dark out, or according to my setting, a shade will come across the top of the greenhouse. So if I'm using lights after hours when it's dark outside and I need lights to control my light period, no light will escape out of the greenhouse with the light deprivation system. In most states, light deprivation systems are required, especially by commercial production facilities, not just cannabis, anything that uses light has light pollution after dusk hours. So that shouldn't be a concern. And obviously, it works the same. At sunrise, it opens. At dusk, it closes on a photocell.
Cool.
I think that's it for me.
Maria, you're next. I just want to follow up on 2 things that Janet had said. So it is within the board's purview to okay the 4-foot, moving it to a 6-foot on the front, and I think we would all be for that. And just for the lights on the outside, where it is sort of in a natural setting, I have a thing for the kelvins being under 4,000 rather than over the 5,000, which is standard, which is the very blue-white light. I know you'll use whatever lights you need inside your facility, but on the outside, if you know.
Yeah, no, I
what I'm
caught
talking
you. You were
about. So
talking about the
they're a
outside.
little bit more yellow and not so like white.
Right.
It just means the bulbs that you put in, if they could be
Right.
under the 4,000.
Right.
Usually they come like 3,700 or something.
Well, the ones I got, I wanted to get a little lower wattage, to be more efficient on
Not
usage.
wattage kelvins, it's the color of the light.
No,
Yeah.
I caught
know
that.
you
No, I
have to have
caught that.
certain
No, I was
levels
just
of
going over
security.
everything. No, I caught what you were saying. I got the gist. No, I just wanted to say that I got lower wattage. I think instead of getting the 3 or the 4, I think I got the 150 or the 200 wattage LEDs. The color spectrum, I actually have to go back and check.
Yeah.
But I can, obviously, I'll take that into consideration.
Yeah, please do. It's not like a rule, but it's just nicer to have more of the yellow tone than.
Right, no,
on the
I,
headlights when you're like blinded by the.
no, I agree. I have the same thing where I live in Florence, and I feel the same way.
Thank you. So I think, Maria, do you still want to ask a question?
Or on your greenhouse, off of the bottom, right?
Oh, yeah, that was a mistake by the civil engineer.
So, yeah, I appreciate all the cameras and the security, and you're obviously going to follow the CCC. I think some signage somewhere at the gate just saying that, security cameras are in use, just to dissuade, the possibility, because, you're a cash operation, and,
Right.
there's a lot of temptation. And then you've gone through a lot of, safety measures as far as your construction and whatnot, but just something for the public and for people to know that, there's cameras, there's motion detector, or whatever you need to say.
Right, I agree. I had considered
Yeah.
the same idea.
I noticed in the application report that Chris had prepared for us, it mentions a couple times, management plan. Has that been described to you at all? What we get here is it says that maybe you might want to have a written management plan that details the transfer process of selling product to the transporter and the security measures, and where else? And that written statement describing the operation of the building, including deliveries and pickups.
Right, I still need to I just finished, I've been so busy, you have to excuse me, I just actually finished a night or two ago, all the different SOPs and all the various parameters that are expected to describe and detail processes and transactions.
Because that's required for other.
It's required for the CCC as well, but the Amherst has requested as well, and I just have not had the chance to submit those final documents, which I've just completed a night or two ago.
And at this time, I'll go through the four, but the waivers requested, if you just want to detail why you are asking to not have a landscape plan.
Basically, under this existing plan, as you see it now, and as you folks saw the other day out at the property, there's nothing that I am intending on changing or would like to change for many reasons, aside from costs. The property is nice the way it is. I don't really have any shrubbery or landscape that needs manicuring or changing. It's really just grassland. In the last year that I've owned the property, only thing I've ever had to do is cut the lawn. There's no shrubberies to trim and other things, so it's actually kind of ideal that I don't have to change anything or trim anything except for the grass. So that's why I requested the landscape waiver.
I would also think that security is improved when you don't have big bushes and stuff growing right outside the building.
Yeah, I mean, well, the CCC doesn't want anything steering view. They want anything in the way. They want full view. That's their issue. Right, obviously being more hidden would be, to keep the facility. The facility, as you were there, you saw is relatively out of view, which is good. Yeah, I mean, more or less trees, either way.
And if the board has questions as we go along, raise your hand. You also ask for a soil erosion plan waiver.
Right, well, like I said, if this plan is approved the way the greenhouse is, because the greenhouse will be built on where asphalt is existing right now, as you saw, nothing in the topography of the land will be changed, so there will be no, and that's one of the reasons I would like to build it this way instead of the other direction on the greenhouse. Then I won't have to touch any of the topography, I won't have to ruin any of the runoff will not change. The soil will be the same as it's been for God knows how many years, probably 50, 60 years. The same water will go into the wetlands. Any water on top of my roofs will go into the cistern, which I'll recover. Most of the water actually comes down Hall Drive and ends up in the wetland from the street. And the electric company actually just came in and built and fixed my whole driveway on order of the electric company and Carl's excavating surface. They came in and did some work, and they fixed it, so they diverted all the water down into the wetland, actually very nicely. So the wetland will not be deprived of any water from this plan, the way it is. And the request for, because at this way, like I said, building it on the existing asphalt, I will not change any topography or any soil, which is good for all, me and the surrounding vegetation.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Having a little trouble looking at the map. So your compost pile is that one that looks like a rectangle. Would that be, if it was a hard rain, going down into the wetland, or am I just misremembering where it is?
Well, there's a lot of grass, that's a grassland
That's the
right
wetland,
there.
okay.
Right where the compost is right now, it's all grassland.
Okay.
So
Okay.
basically, I was planning on just spreading soil out there. And the soil, once I spread that soil out there, it will just get eaten up by the grass over time. And you probably wouldn't even notice that it was a compost pile. Because if I spread the dirt out, even periodically, the grasslands there will just eat it up. And there's another one inside as well. I don't know if I'm inside. There's a compost area in the back there as well.
That was also grassy.
Right.
You ask for a sign plan waiver, so I assume you're not going to have a sign.
Well, I didn't want to attract attention as well as Ms. Chow had mentioned that, and I agree with her that a deterrence of saying cameras and police take notice and of that effect do have a deterring effect, which I did consider. At the same point, I just figured I would rather not attract people by putting a sign that's saying Riverside Organics or things like that, and they'll say, what's this? I think people, if they see it, they'll know what it is from the design and layout. But I think that Ms. Chow is right that I should probably put some type of sign to deter people, to let them know that there are cameras and that police presence, et cetera.
Yeah. And Chris, you could help him with that okay. You also ask for a waiver on the traffic impact statement. I think it's pretty obvious why.
Right, only be one or two people,
Yeah.
maybe three at most.
Anyone else have any other questions? Chris, I see we don't have anything from the town engineer or the fire department. Will that come for the next meeting, or?
I did speak with the town engineer the other day, and he said he didn't have any issues about this project, and we haven't heard anything from the fire department. I asked the town engineer to send me an email, but he hasn't done that yet.
Great.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll get emails from both before, okay. And I also see the Conservation Commission is meeting with you all on the 13th
Yes,
next
ma'am.
week.
Yes, ma'am.
And we'll get something from that.
And, excuse me, in relation to the fire department, I spoke to Mike Roy on Ms. Brestrup's direction a few times. He's going to get back to me on what type of fire extinguishers are required, chemical or CO2. I also wanted to maybe put some extra, not required, extra fire extinguishers, automatic in the attic or roofs, which are automatically activated. I spoke to him about the width size necessary for gates to get access of the trucks, which is 9.5 feet. My gates will be a minimum of 10 feet, just to add a little bit extra, possibly 11. The doors in the facility are all handicap access of 36 inches required by code. Actually, not required by code because this is under certain square footage, but I did it out of respect or just in case of needing handicap size. The setback for the generator was also checked with the fire department. It needs to be 5 feet from any structure or opening, in the house, which I
I
did.
think we saw a concrete pad
Right,
that would
right,
accommodate.
right, exactly.
Great.
But any other issues with the fire department, I'm sure that at the point in time when Mike Roy wants to come down, and we'll go through that process.
Great. Any other questions from the board? If not, I'll open up to public questions. Okay. So just a show of hands, is there anyone here who has questions for this applicant about the facility? I see no one, so that's easy. You don't have to move. All right. So Chris, yeah, anything else you want to say?
I just wanted to put it into the record that we did receive a letter from Gordon Hall, who owns property surrounding this property, and he is not in support of this application, so just wanted to make sure that you had seen that. Yep.
And read it. Thank you for reminding that. So when would this come back to us, Chris?
You could have it come back to you on the 20th of November, because they will have gone through their Concom review by then.
Okay. Would that work? Would that work for you?
I don't know, what do you mean?
Come back, so we're still waiting on some final information, so we can't vote on it tonight, but we can have you on our agenda for the next meeting, which is in 2 weeks. I think that's the 20th.
So,
Do we have a time, like, what else is on the agenda, Chris?
There's one other thing that hasn't been advertised yet, and I think it's a relatively small thing. It's a little tent that Enterprise Rent-A-Car wants to put in back of their building, and I think that's the only thing that's coming on the 20th. Oh, no, the other thing is the Bank of America lighting is on the 20th. That was put on the 20th as well. And Amherst Hills, that's right. So this could come back on the 20th, it could come back on December 4th.
so just so I clarify, the issues that you wanted to cover, just,
We just have to wait for information clearance from, like, the fire department.
Oh, okay.
And you have to go to the COMCON.
oh, okay,
You
okay,
know, we have
okay.
to
Oh, I
get
thought there were
this.
other things that you wanted to.
Yeah, no,
okay,
so
okay.
that's why we can't act on it.
Oh, okay, okay.
Now, because we have to get. the
Right,
rest of
right,
the
gotcha,
information.
gotcha,
You have
gotcha,
been
right.
very thorough. Yes, Jen, do you have a question?
I just have a question about the easement where it is on your property. So just to address
Sure.
Mr. Hall, who's not here.
Well, Mr. Hall, if you notice, in the compost pile, when you folks came in and you drove down the little road, my little private road there, if you were to continue and drive through the compost pile, that's where the proposed road was years ago.
Yeah, years ago, but it's a private road.
Right. Actually, Hall Road is a private road, and the DPW told me that if Mr. Hall wants to close off that road, he can do so anytime he wants, and they can't say anything. That sounds a little ridiculous. But,
So is there an easement that goes through
I
the?
believe there is. I believe there is an easement. And in relation to Mr. Hall's comment, it's logically not sound because, I mean, you could say if you sold someone a gun, that means they're going to go commit a crime with it. There's no logic to his statement. I have absolutely no intention on enrolling in the penitentiary program in our country. No, I'm
just
saying-
talking about the,
No, I know, but with regard to Mr. Hall's statement of illegality, I have no intention on risking $600,000 of my family's money to do something so ridiculous as do something illegal.
so would you move the compost pile somewhere else if it's interfering with his access? Is that?
He's not going to get permission to build anything there, not ever.
Chris?
He nonetheless does have an easement, so you don't want to block his easement, and you may consider relocating the compost pile.
Oh, well, I mean, look, I mean, it's just, I mean, there's a whole, I mean, if he came in there to build a road, which I don't think is going to happen anytime soon, there's a lot more he'd have to remove than the soil. So I think by putting soil there is not going to be any difference. He'd have to come in there with 50 trucks and a whole excavation team to, build the road there. Because it's all trees in front of that. In front of that, it's a whole forest, so, the difference between a bit of soil or not, I think is honestly is inconsequential.
So I was going to ask, an easement, he'd have to ask permission, and, yeah. What? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, Gordon Hall already has the easement, so he has the right to pass and repass there, and he would prefer not to have his passage blocked. So however they choose to work that out, it's really something between property owners, I would say, but
Right. I guess I wanted to frame it in the sense, if he wants to walk, he can walk, but right now, it would be impossible to get any kind of truck. So he would have to cut down trees, and I assume ask permission to have, right, to have tree cutting company come in and pull out, so it would be quite a bit of work, which at that point, you could just move some of the dirt.
It wouldn't be a problem, but you gotta understand, that road leads right into the heart of the wetlands. So unless the Concom and DEP are gonna change all the laws in the state and say, okay, go ahead, do what you want, I don't think he's gonna get a permission to do anything there. Because that literally drives right, if you see right there, that is the wetland, which I have to go in front of the Concom for, and that's the road. That road drives right into the heart smack of the wetland. He's not, I'm sure he wanted to develop that property years ago. I don't think he got the okay for whatever reasons, I don't know.
Well, we can think on it. I just wanted to have it clear that, so people understand that it's not like a road that's there, even a dirt road, and you're dumping a pile of dirt in the middle of a road.
No.
It's an easement.
Right.
It has not been used in any sort of recent time, to the point that a forest has grown behind it.
Right,
So
right.
it wouldn't be like a quick,
No.
he needs to drive through. So just wanted to clarify.
Mr. Hall is, as far as I know, older than 80. He just, maybe he's bored. I don't know. I'm not trying to be, rude, but I don't think he's doing anything with this property.
And as Chris said, it's an issue, in a way, between neighbors, good neighbors. He seemed, from his email, there was some confusing questions he had on there that it seems that he could use some information to maybe ease some of his fears, but.
Right.
Could you, then when you come back, could you show us where the easement is on that property? So I'm assuming it's probably on your deed.
Well, it's denoted right there. It's there. If you-
No, but just if you could, I would just appreciate if you could mark it on your, on a thing. We could
Sure,
look at that.
sure.
Yeah, that's the dotted lines. It's a road width. Okay, anyone else have any information or questions they want? So, did we pick a date, the 20th, or do you want to wait till December? We have a pretty big agenda. I don't know where would he be in the queue on the 20th? The 13th. Yeah.
I don't think we've assigned times to anything that's coming on the 20th, so depending on what happens with this case, I would put the Enterprise Rent-A-Car after it.
Okay.
So if you wanted to continue this, and Bank of America, we haven't set a particular date, time for that. It was a request by the applicant. You had initially continued it till tonight. In fact, it's on your agenda for tonight to continue it. So you're going to have an opportunity to choose a time for Bank of America to come back. So you could conceivably ask Mr. Gerfine to come back at 7:05 on the 20th, and then put everything else behind that.
Amherst Hills, do you think we'll have information enough in 2 weeks for that to still?
We'll
stick
put
to?
it on the agenda, but I don't know what the status is going to be. Yep.
Okay, so we're not, well, 7:05, so you'd be the first main thing for us to do on the 20th.
That would be fine, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, we'll see you then.
Okay, thank you very much.
Want to make a
And I
motion?
have to- Yeah, someone can make a motion to continue this to 7:05 on the 20th?
I make a motion to continue this hearing to 7:05 on November 20th. Is that right?
Yes, correct. And a second? Great. Any discussion? All in favor? Yep, unanimous. Good. We'll see you then.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so the next thing will be Amherst College, if you guys want to come up and set up or whatever. Yep, no, go do that.
Leaving me up here on the side?
Christine, when you get started on the Amherst College project, you should make a note that Maria and David had issues related to being abutters, but they've gone to the town council and they've been cleared and allowed to vote on this project. Filed a disclosure and the town council voted to allow them to vote.
I'll start, there'll be back in some preamble to continue the public hearing for Amherst College. Actually, can I do this before we
Wait, you should wait till everybody's here.
It's okay.
Apologize to Amherst College for all the delays, for the delay in the first place about the voting issue and for tonight having to wait.
No worries.
So thank you. Thank you for waiting.
Let's see.
continue the public hearing for SPR 2020-02, Amherst College athletic field renovation, 212 Northampton Road. This public hearing is being continued from the regular meeting of October 16th, 2019. It is 8:45 SPR 2020-02, Amherst College athletic field renovation. Request site plan review approval for an athletic field improvements, including renovation of existing natural grass field to a synthetic turf and installation of athletic lighting, asphalt walkways, and spectator seating, fencing, and netting. Map 14C, parcel 13, RN zoning district. We sort of opened and immediately closed this at our last meeting due to two of our members being abutters and some issues, so we filed disclosures, and those were presented to town council a little like a week ago, and they were approved. And then that's regular on the chat, and David Lindsay. So all five of us are able to work on this. Thank you for your patience. So I will open to have your presentation.
Great. All right, thank you. Sure. My name's Megan Bazinski. I'm a civil engineer with Activitas here on behalf of Amherst College. And I've, go ahead.
And Tom Davies with Amherst College.
So I'm just going to go through a little bit of an overview of the project. We have, I believe Chris spoke with engineering, and we did submit stormwater report, and there was no comments from engineering on that. We are also going before conservation for an RDA next week on the 13th as well, and I can show you where that little spot is. It's not a vast majority of the site, it's just an area where we're grading some topsoil. So we are going to go before the commission for that work. So moving along, quick overview of the site, and I'll use the mouse here so that you guys can see it. Amherst College's Western Athletic Campus. We have the Eastern Athletic Campus over on the other side, and then we have the Western. This campus, so it looks cooler when it just goes slide to slide, but I'm going to have to scroll. What we have over here, the project that we're talking about that's going to happen next spring is within this yellow dashed line. The site is actually broken up into two different parcels, with the red line basically being the division. Over here on the eastern side, this is the educational district. Over on the western side is the residential neighborhood district. Okay. A quick overview as we focus in here. So that line, that red line that you saw overlaid on the survey with the proposed project basically comes right along here. We updated the setback plan to be double the setback to show that there are no structures within that 2 times the setback per the bylaw. So that's been updated and submitted to the planning department. And as you can see, and we'll zoom in a little bit more in a second, but basically the only thing that touches this setback line in terms of the actual frontage of the property is this little corner that's basically a small pathway that we're regrading that's existing, that we're just doing some regrading to match into the field, and then some fencing as well. That's about 6 feet tall. So existing conditions, just to kind of put some aerial to it, we have Gooding Field, which is in the educational side, and then we have Hills Field, which is in the residential side. And the project that we're talking about tonight is to replace the existing natural grass field for Hills with a high-end field hockey facility with a short pile synthetic turf. I think, was everyone at the site walk a few weeks back with Mark? Okay, a few of you were, I think. Okay. Okay. Okay, great. But this is a quick view, kind of standing on the top mound. Here's Gooding Field up here. That educational line basically runs the bottom of this slope. So we have an existing natural grass field that's sized for a football field right now. Football fields are long but pretty narrow. The proposed project is actually going to move into this hill and make the field and spectator seating a little bit closer to Gooding and expand out on this site over here on the western side towards the softball field as well. And we'll show you some pictures of that in a second. There is a pretty decent-sized mound that comes down from Gooding down to Hills. It's about a 15-foot difference from Hills Field up to Gooding. So there's quite a bit of, down to the road on Route 9, there's quite a bit of grade change, and it's really kind of hidden back there on that natural grass field for the majority of the road. Existing equipment out there right now, this green box that you see is the electric box that houses all the equipment for the electricity on the site. It's the distribution box, so it has the power for any electrical outlets having to do with either of the fields, as well as the Musco lighting system that's existing. And that's going to be relocated. So in the proposed condition, as you see, we have our field limits right around here. We're going to have a short pile turf that will have an irrigation system that we'll talk about a little bit. We have elevation of this field is pretty similar to where Hills is now. It's just a wider field in comparison to the natural grass field that's there now. We have spectator seating to the east, team areas to the west, and then we're going to be using 20-foot high netting with some chain link fence on both ends of the fields to help keep balls within. We'll also have some fencing just to protect the field on the spectator side, and then over on the western side we'll have additional netting to prevent lacrosse use in the spring from going down to softball, because the fields do get closer than they are now because of the width. So to walk through, to zoom in a little bit, to walk through a little bit more, we have the synthetic turf field. And Alex, do you pass me that box? Just as a sample if it's helpful, we have the short pile turf. So this doesn't get filled in. It's a very short nappy product, which is really good for field hockey ball roll, and that's why that's being proposed on this field. That's different than the type of turf that's on Gooding now and is going to be proposed, as well as what's up on Pratt, which is the longer pile that gets filled in with the sand and the rubber. So a little difference there. So field hockey fields do want to be watered. I know that sounds strange, but for any field hockey players here? No? Okay. Oh, good. All right. So the short pile, when it's dry, is actually a bit, the ball skips. So they actually irrigate the field to help slow down the ball and to give it a little bit more stick to the carpet as opposed to kind of skipping across the surface. This is a field up at Northwestern, and you can kind of see the water on the ground that actually sticks in the turf. And as they're playing, that kind of helps with the ball roll, helps with the goalie sliding because it can be a bit abrasive when it is dry. So the irrigation system will use the municipal water. They're basically golf course type heads on steroids. So you have 3 heads along the sidelines on both sides, and then 1 behind each goal, and they actually throw that water across the field. So, where natural grass fields will throw it, maybe 20, 30 feet, these are throwing almost 100 feet across the field to get good coverage. So we'll have that on there. Let's see here. So the lighting for the field, Gooding Field, as you know, is lit. What you'll see, I'll come back to this picture in a second, but Gooding Field has 4 poles lighting it right now. These 2 poles will remain, S3 and S4 as is, but due to the expansion of Hills Field, we actually have to replace those 2 poles because we essentially hit them in our expansion. So what's going to happen is the 2 poles that are in between are going to be double lit, one side lighting Gooding, one side lighting Hills, and then the poles on the westernmost side will just go to light to Hills Field. Gooding will remain the metal halide lights that are there now. We're actually going to be able to reuse the bulbs from the western ones to light the field again, just with new poles. The field, the new Hills Field will actually use the LED lighting, which I'll show you some pictures of in a second, that have even better light control in comparison to the metal halide, which is also very good. We are lighting to about 70-foot candles, which is necessary for streaming capabilities of the fields. Recreational play can really be down at kind of between 30 and 50-foot candles, but in order to stream live games, you really prefer to be up around that 70-foot candles. The system will be set up, though, so that when there is recreational play, if there's intramural or club play, things like that, they can use the 30-foot candle level, so it's not always at the 70. All right. This is just a little zoom in. But so this is an example of fields that use the metal halide. Similar, I didn't have one of Gooding. I would have used Gooding, but of the metal halide, and you can see the cutoff does happen very quickly. But this is actually an aerial of the new LED systems, and you can see how much more quickly the light is cut off, right behind these poles. This is actually a road that has some street lights, but you can barely see it. So the LED technology really has taken the athletic lighting to a new level. And as you'll see from the light, layouts here, at the road, we're pretty much at 0.1 to 0.2 right along that property line, so there's really not going to be any spill going across the street. And when they do the light levels, they're really kind of just the manufacturers, they're assuming it's a wide open space. It's not taking into account trees or things like that. And so as soon as you get some of those canopies in, that light level, it goes down even faster. If I'm going too fast, let me know. All right, so one of the questions from the planning department were just what some of our materials were. So I wanted to run through those pretty quickly. The bleachers will be similar to Gooding, a 5-row bleacher. It'll have, just some colored, bench seats, things like that. But they're more or less portable. They won't really be moved around, but, technically they're an angle frame that sits on the concrete. We are showing a shed in this corner, which will be a simple wooden shed, probably some sort of A-frame, very simple. We do have walls on site, so As I mentioned, we have that 15-foot grade change between Hills and Gooding. So right now, we're actually calling for a concrete wall up along the backside, and then as we get a little bit lower than that 15 feet, moving to more of a segmental block wall, similar to what's up at Gooding right now. So we have that block wall kind of running this area, and then coming up to concrete, and then coming back down to segmental right here, and as well as over on the softball field side. There's about a, I think it's an 8-foot grade change between these two fields, so we felt the segmental was adequate for that location. The team areas, we're proposing portable benches, but covered portable benches, as well as a very simple team meet management or game management. This is from Harvard, so you can see these are actually the referee enclosures, but very similar. But just simple covered benches that are attached. These can be moved around and weighted down. And then a simple game management area like they have up at Gooding at the moment. And this is actually, they've improved the team management areas. There have been, these can catch the wind if you have a windy site. So when the kids aren't on the field playing, they actually, this part actually moves down. There's a little hydraulic piece right here that allows that to lower, so it's not able to catch the wind and potentially blow over. So fencing and netting, as I mentioned, we have 6-foot fencing with 20-foot high netting running along this edge, and basically the majority of this edge as well in here. And then we just have 4-foot fencing to separate the spectators from the field area. This is an example of that 6-foot high fencing. We're probably not going to have padding. There'll probably be windscreen here, and then the netting that goes along with it. And I like this picture because it shows the fencing, but you really can't see the netting. So from the street side coming down, you really do see through it. It doesn't seem like a wall or anything like that. You're able to look right through. And there's some on the other end too, but you wouldn't even know it. And then finally, we have our scoreboard. So Gooding Field and the softball field both have very similar scoreboards, which we're going to mimic for Hills Field as well, which would be about here. This is about 18 feet wide and 11 feet tall, similar to those other boards. All right. So going through just the application, the original project for Gooding and Hills and the softball field was done in 2007, and I attached the conditions that we had, or the site plan review as part of that. I think I've gone through mostly everything in there. I know there was a question, and actually you brought it up in the last hearing about the lighting and that lighting temperature. And so the fixtures are LED, the 5700 K, which is higher, but for athletic fields, okay. Sounds good. I can go through all of this, or I can really open up to questions if that's a little bit easier, and we can go from there. Sure. Oh, thank you.
Let's raise your hands if you were there.
So we were there, whoever raised their hands. You covered a lot of what we talked about. There were questions about how much of the hill between the Gooding Field and the Hill Field is going to be cut away, and where the mounding of the soil, which is, I believe, going to be, it's going to be isn't it where the shed is proposed?
So there's mounding in this location, and we do have a little cutout around the shed in order to accommodate it, but we do have this hill right here. That existing walkway, I don't know if you guys walked up, but here are the stairs leading from softball up to Hills, and then there's another set of stairs that lead to the walkway. The reason that we have the space for this mounding is the football field is 360 feet, and, back of end zone to back of end zone, where the lacrosse field and the field hockey field, we're going to use the 330. So we're essentially gaining 30 feet of space and being able to use that for a portion of that excavated material under the field. And so we're doing that here, and then we're also doing, we have a little bit more room on the mound that's there now, south of Gooding, that we're going to use.
We saw the fields. I think, at least I was under the impression that the proposed field hockey field would also have the rubber pellet infill, but apparently it's just carpet.
Right.
But the Gooding field would be replaced, would be a similar replacement to what's currently there. We saw I believe that the lights, the two lights that will be, the poles that will be replaced between the two fields, and the two new lights on the other side of the field, so it's on the west side of the field, they'll be the same height. We saw where there would be the fencing and the netting. Again, it's fairly tight for as wide a field as it is, it seemed. I mean, not fairly tight, it's quite tight for that width of field needed, and with hills on either side. That's what I remember. Anyone else?
I remember the wall between the two fields, and is that like a 15-foot drop, or is that going to increase?
It is.
So is there any, I just picture people dropping off of it.
Sure. So this is, we are going to have fencing going right along here as well, and netting. So it's going to be really hard, people really can't get to that edge, because absolutely that would be a concern.
And I have your report, very thorough, detailed. I do notice that we have requested some plans for the university, sense like a site plan. So the management of the site is not changing, and therefore it's not submitted. Traffic impact statement, as noted below, in item 7.3, the site is not changing, therefore you're not submitting GIS. Pollution and hazardous materials plan. It should be noted that the project will require land use construction general permit, which will address pollution and storage of hazardous materials during construction, and a draft stormwater pollution prevention plan has been submitted and as an attachment. And demolition of historic preservation is at a and signs, so that's sort of your scoreboard.
Right.
You could just point out where those have placed.
Sure.
And the signs.
Sure. So this sign is right here. It'll be elevated. It's about 8 feet off the ground, and then width-wise, it's about 18, and then another 11 height. It is, yes. Yep.
I was curious about the irrigation, and you definitely, explained why you need irrigation for artificial turf. So thank you for that. I was curious about the relationship. Again, this isn't more just out of curiosity. The wetland to the north. I haven't walked the site, so I'm just kind of confused about the topography and why that. Where is that wetland
Sure.
exactly?
Let me actually go back for a second. If I can find my survey. Actually, this could show it. So there's the existing rail trail back here off the property, and basically next to that rail trail is a drainage ditch that has been flagged. And so it follows along the rail trail right in this location. So when you do offset, I don't know if this plan shows it, but you have the 100-foot buffer line that basically comes down here and then comes, just basically follows that line. So all the work that we're doing within the the 100-foot buffer is actually to do with both Gooding, a little bit up here on Gooding as well, but with the regrading of the mound, and that's it. Water, in terms of like erosion and things like that, nothing can actually get from our site to, towards that wetland, just because of the natural grades between our site, the fence line, and the wetlands. So it's hopefully be a quick in and out for the RDA in terms of that work.
Thank you.
I have a question about the light. You said there are 4 new poles. There's not currently lighting there. I should know this, but
There's not lighting right
Okay.
here, there's not permanent lighting right now.
Okay.
When, as part of the site plan back in 2007, there was an allowance for temporary lighting for kind of the fall conditions and the early spring of use of that field. So there is technically lighting happening on that field, but they're using the small temporary kind of like highway lights.
I see. So these will be more intense and brighter, and there are no nighttime games, is that right? It's just for like dusk or?
No, there will be, there
Oh, there
will
will
be
be.
potential night games and practices. for sure.
Okay, yeah, it says something like Gooding Field, it goes till 10 PM. That's like the max.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
That was something at the site visit. It was a different gentleman who was there.
Mark,
on that
yep.
question, that there had been reach out to the neighbors, and the neighbors, there was no, if you could just detail about that there was outreach and there weren't any
Sure.
issues.
You wanna-
Sure.
And they were okay with just doing what you're saying.
Sure. We advertised to the neighborhood around the area to just try to get information out about the project. And we'd had a pretty good showing, I don't know, half a dozen or a dozen people or something like that from the
Great.
neighborhood showed up. So I'm just curious about, what's going to be happening and
Right.
other folks wanting more information, but ran through all these different pieces to it.
So what you've been doing, you're just going to continue doing regarding hours of
Correct.
controlling the lights, and they were
Yes.
okay with that?
Yes, that's right. One of the comparisons, we are using temporary lighting on the Hills Field now. In fact, if you were to go out there, not now, probably, but an hour ago or something like that, you would have seen the type that you see along the highway at a construction site. Those actually create a lot more glare because they're not as tall. And of course, they make noise and exhaust and all that stuff. So this will be an improvement in that sense.
Great,
And certainly much better for play.
Yeah.
thank you.
So one of the questions I had was, turf fields are very hot compared to grass, and I was wondering if the college would be planting some trees around to kind of mitigate that heat.
We weren't planning, as you saw, we have pretty steep slopes going down there, so for a deciduous tree to really get that tree canopy, it's kind of hard to plant those in the slopes. And in terms of maintenance as well, just with the deciduous leaf kind of blowing onto the surface, there's really not a preference for that.
What about the western side? Because it's the flat side. There were some trees there. I was just wondering if that,
Over on this side? No, that's not flat. That, hold on a second. That goes right down as well. So we have the wall here, and that actually drops about 8 feet. And then we have just a maintenance access road coming down. You can see the grade lines going down to the, I forget which building that is, but going down there.
another question I have, which isn't quite in the purview, is that would you be letting the high school use this field? Because, I know that Amherst College has let different, like the high school hockey team or anything like that?
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And then, right now, people do use that field, probably because it's open. So would the fencing would restrict access to it for?
It would, yeah. The feel-like fields, I don't want to say it's delicate, but it's a little bit, you don't want as much traffic on there. Just operationally, it's a little bit different than the infield turf. So, I know a lot of people use Gooding as well. We prefer people to kind of move up to Gooding for the use of that field as opposed to the feel-like field.
Chris, we got an email that was dated October 11th saying that it looks like they were going to go to COMCON for a request for determination. Is that happened, or,
I think it's going on November 13th.
Right.
so can we take action on this without having that?
I think you probably can, because this is just a request for determination as opposed to a notice of intent. So they were essentially told by the wetlands agent in our office that it's probably nothing here, but they, the formality is to go before the Conservation Commission.
Good, I wanted to confirm that with you. Any other questions from the, go ahead, David?
Now, where does the field hockey team play?
They play up on Gooding Field.
So this is potentially, so it's potential that there are 3 fields that could be active with events going on simultaneously, 4 fields actually, including the softball field.
I would say for practices, yes. I would say for the close proximity of the fields, they wouldn't be having games at the same time. They would be staggering those events. Because when you start to get more of those whistles and things like that for game time as well as announcements, it would be too overwhelming because the fields are in such close proximity, so those will be staggered during the day and the evening.
And how early, so the 10 p.m. surprises me, being a neighbor. I thought that the lights only ran and were permitted to run till 9 p.m. And so I've got a question. So that's just a question, whether it's 10 or 9. And then how early, and then I'd also ask about music on the field and on all of the fields, actually, how early, how late that's permitted, because it's kind of can be loud.
Sure. So, in terms of the timeline, I believe that Gooding and Hills are the 10 o'clock, and Pratt Field is the one that has the earlier timeline. I think that's 8, actually. So we were going to maintain that on Hills. In terms of early, Don, what's the earliest that you guys have practices or anything like that during the weekend?
Depends how many professors have late class, so we have to wake up early and get our practice in so the kids can go to do everything. But there's times when we come in at 6 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning.
And when you come in at that time, is music and boom boxes permitted or encouraged?
No, sir.
And where will all of the parking you're going to maintain the parking as is? There's no expected increase in vehicles being used for those practices that might be happening simultaneously?
No, because all those 3 fields, or 4 fields, if you include Pratt, can be used at the same time right now for practices. So, you can have football, you can have club, whatever, using the existing natural grass on Hills, so that's really it's not going to change. And most of the kids will either park at the field house area up near Pratt, down by softball, or really most are parking over at the main athletic center and walking over.
Chris?
I just wonder if the gentleman who spoke earlier might identify himself.
Don Falster, Director of Athletics.
Sorry, can you say that more slowly?
FAUL STICK. STICK.
Thank you very much, Director of Athletics. We just need minutes.
Are there any other questions from the board, or I'll open it up to public comment? A show of hands if there's anyone here who wishes to speak or ask a question about this project. I don't see any hands. So, how does everyone feel about this? Do we need more information, or does someone want to make a motion, or? To close the hearing? You'd close, that could be part of the motion, that you'd say you'd close the public hearing. Chris, what would we need to include?
So for this one, I think you probably don't need to read through the whole list of 11.24 criteria unless you feel like you really want to do that. You can make a blanket statement that this project meets all the relevant requirements of 11.24. And you can make a motion to approve it if you are ready to do that. And I'm looking through the conditions of the previous permit, and it doesn't seem like any of them apply because they have to do with ornamental fence and landscape plan and grading and drainage being submitted to the town engineer, and they have already done that, and the town engineer hasn't found any problems. So I think legitimately you could have no conditions unless you're uncomfortable with that and have thought of some conditions.
Okay, the requested waivers.
And okay, the requested waivers. So you'd have to include, close the public hearing, 11.24, no conditions, approve the waivers. And what else did I say? Maybe Miss Pam wrote it down.
And an affirmative answer from the Concom next week.
That in a condition?
Someone just want to say, close the public hearing and make a motion to everything that Chris said?
I move to close the public hearing and everything that Chris just said.
Excellent. And we can have Chris reread it before we actually take a vote. Someone want to second that?
I'll second.
Great. Okay, is there any further discussion or comments or questions, concerns? Do you have anything else you need to say? Chris? anything else you want to say?
I didn't write it down as I was talking. Maybe Ms. Field Sadler wrote it down.
Well, it isn't exactly right down in the motion. I wrote down that you deem that it meets the requirements of 11.24, that the conditions of the existing permit do not seem to be relevant here, that you approve the request of the waivers, and that we're going to close this public hearing. Was there more?
And we expect a positive result from the COMCON meeting. Okay. Any other discussion, or are we good to vote? I think we're good. All right, raise your hand in favor, and it's unanimous.
Thank you very
Great.
much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you
Thanks.
very much. Thanks for your patience.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, so next. Okay, so Chris, do I actually have to open it and then close it again, or just say that we're just?
But the
Oh, I
Javier
think-
Campos?
did you give me something? Hold on, Pam.
Oh,
Continue the hearing. Oh, so I'll just read this. Okay, good. Announce. This is a public hearing is continued from July 24th. I should back up one. SPR 2019-08. Javier Campos of Adams and Ruxton for Bank of America, 360 College Street. So this public hearing is being continued from July 24th, 2019, and September 18th, 2019. It was, do I have to do anything else besides that? Or do I have
so it was also continued to tonight, which we forgot to put in. It was continued to tonight, and then you're going to continue it again at the request of the applicant to November 20th.
So it had been continued to tonight, November 6th. But due to the applicant's request, we are continuing it again to November 20th, 2019. The public hearing is now open. Do I hear a motion to continue to November 20th, 2019 at 7:50? Is that what time we're going with, 7:15? Because the first, we did 7:05. All right, so you guys here, someone want to make a motion to continue this public hearing to November 20th?
I'll make the
at
motion, but
7:15?
I'm not quite sure, Christine, if you'll hear it. You wanted to hear a motion, but I'll make it.
Oh,
You hear it?
okay. Well, I want to hear it. Make it and I want to hear it.
I made it. Make the motion to continue the hearing, sorry to.
And can I hear a second? Second. Do I hear any questions or discussion? All right, all in favor? It's unanimous, yep. So that goes to that. All right, so now, okay, David, we'll move to item 4, Planning and Zoning, ZSC report.
We've had several robust and hearty zoning subcommittee meetings in the past few weeks, including today's. The planning board is welcome to attend all of the zoning subcommittee meetings. We are wrestling with the taxes moving forward, and we're waiting for further sort of discussions from the town hall about whether to consider large revisions to the zoning bylaws or to be more sort of surgical, strategic, and incremental. And there was differences of opinion expressed, but the general sense of the zoning subcommittee was to be patient and to wait to see whether there's a larger potential zoning amendments to be presented, to be prepared in a queue, basically, and then presented to the planning board for consideration, then present to the town council and its various committees that it's forming. So we talked about the supplemental dwelling unit amendment, the planning board voting requirements, and then especially under Janet's sort of contributions, revising the inclusionary zoning bylaw. But we are still going forward with the notion of waiting for folks to decide whether they want incremental piecemeal presentations to the town council or whether a larger revision is needed. Is that fair? For everybody but Jack?
The non.
So I think that's what we spent a lot of time discussing, whether the strategy of reviewing the zoning laws. We've also asked for the building commissioner and others, the planning department, if they have a list of kind of technical glitches or inconsistencies that have arisen over their experience with the current law, to just start compiling that list and sharing. I think a list has already been compiled, but if I've seen it, I don't recall what it is. And that's pretty much what we talked about. We're going to continue next week, or the next meeting, with starting off with inclusionary zoning discussion, and then Maria is going to help us lead, I think, this infill, the small scale, the missing middle. And there you go.
Thank you. Is that right? Great. So we can move on to, is there any public comment for, no? Old business, item A, Amherst Housing Policy Draft. John Hornick, Chair of the Amherst Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. If you'd like to come forward, maybe we'll ask some questions.
Hello.
Thank you for waiting.
Thank you.
I hope you got a nap or something back there.
John Hornick, Chair of the Amherst Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. It's a mouthful even when I say it quickly.
It never rolls off the tongue.
I don't have a presentation prepared. I guess I can just say briefly, we did obviously have a conversation, was it 2 weeks ago now? I've lost track.
2 or 4. We had so many meetings
Right.
since we've seen you. It's all a blur.
Right. I do appreciate the fact that a number of you attended the Housing Forum on Monday evening, and I hope you found that interesting and informative. I'm really not quite sure what I can say beyond what I've already said about the draft town policy. I think the task really before you is to tell the housing trusts, including myself, what we would do to strengthen that policy. The policy says little or nothing, really, about zoning issues and how those might be reshaped or employed in order to help reach the goal of expanding affordable housing considerably. I know that there's been some discussion of zoning changes in the zoning subcommittee, which I think I would welcome. I think that's great. But I guess the question for me is, do you believe that it's important to expand affordable housing in Amherst, and understanding that the planning board alone really can't do that task, but what do you think that is under the purview or the authority of the planning board that would help us reach that goal?
Have you received the comments from town council on this?
Well, the answer to that is yes and no. I did receive questions, really, from the Finance Committee, either late last week or early this week, I can't recall, and I responded to those with a note. And then there was a bit of discussion of those on Tuesday afternoon at their 2:30 meeting. We didn't cover nearly all of the questions that they had that I tried to respond to. Mostly we were talking about data that they were interested in about the number of affordable units that had been developed over the last 5 years, some of which I could provide. I also gave them some information about where to expect new affordable units over the next 5 years, let's say, based on what's already in the pipeline with respect to planning. They were also interested, and I didn't have this information on, if you might say, what's the denominator, what's the total amount of housing stock in Amherst, and also how has that changed over the last 5 years. So I've asked the planning department, actually specifically Nate Malloy, to add on to what I provided to kind of correct it and provide additional information that the planning board, that the Finance Committee would like. There was also some brief discussion of other strategies that might be employed, and in particular, the chair of the Finance Committee, Andy Steinberg, talked about inclusionary zoning, about which he seemed to be skeptical. He reported that there was a report done by RKG Associates, I believe, on behalf of the town 5 years ago that indicated that there was a risk to undertaking inclusionary zoning, that it might stop the development of new units in town. I will say, since that report, the inclusionary zoning bylaw has affected the new development at 70 University Drive, and the developer did put in 4 inclusionary zoning units. There are additional units expected on the Northampton Road development called Aspen Heights, I think. Presidential Apartments added inclusionary zoning units as part of an agreement to expand their overall capacity. and there may be at least one more that I'm not thinking about. So the obstacles that were anticipated in that report 5 years ago may not be as serious as was suggested.
Chris, I think you had said that, is University Drive, it didn't get triggered because of the inclusionary, it would have already happened, or?
I'll have to look into, I remember exactly.
So
And
Ms.
I-
Master will check on that, but, because we're getting different information on that, whether or not it would have had to happen anyways. But it's just great that they're there, that,
Yeah, without casting aspersions on the developer, to the best of my knowledge, developers don't typically volunteer to do inclusionary zoning. I mean, the exception, which actually we shouldn't forget, is the development at North Square by Beacon Communities. Beacon, quote-unquote, volunteered to do 26 units of inclusion, 26 affordable units with actually pretty deep affordability. They did that, though, with an incentive from the town to reduce its taxes for a period of a decade.
so you're looking to the planning board to give you specifics on how to fill out your policy on specific zoning and planning efforts that would happen from our jurisdiction to help create more affordable housing.
Yeah, I'd make two corrections to what you said. One is it's our policy, not your policy. And I really mean that. That is, my view is that this is a town policy, and in particular, the Housing Trust, the Planning Board, the Town Council, and the Community Preservation Act Committee should all participate in it. Otherwise, we could have just done it ourselves as a housing trust and said, this is it.
I say yours because I'm like, we don't want to write it. We don't want more work, but we do want to help. So just eventually it will be
Yeah.
all of our policy. and
Right.
Hopefully we'll all be very proud.
And the other thing I would say is it's difficult, I'm sure, in your position to say, okay, we know for certain we're going to have a new inclusionary zoning bylaw. You can't know that, in part because even if you all decide that that's something that should be done, town council has to agree to it. So I think what would be fair to ask of you is that you talk about 2, 3, 4 areas, whatever you think is appropriate, that the planning board intends to explore in order to ease the development of new affordable housing in town, without committing the town to say it's going to be exactly this or exactly that. But, you know, what is it you'll use your occasional planning time, so to speak, to do?
Or extra time. Maria, I think you had your hand up.
So I just want to say I really appreciated you coming out and coming to the planning board, and it's really great when we, as a planning board and zoning subcommittee, can finally be proactive about things, not just reactive to all these things that get thrown at us. So you've basically sort of, initiated the zoning subcommittee to start studying housing options and affordable, not just affordable with capital A, but affordability. And so we've taken on to ourselves to actually, write reports about things we're passionate about. And Ms. Janet has done, inclusionary zoning, and I'm tackling this really interesting term called the missing middle. And we had such a great discussion, I didn't get to talk about it at all. But if you have time, it'd be great to have you at the next zoning subcommittee meeting, because we are delving into like specific zoning amendments, specific ways we can change things and unlock things. And so it'd be great to have you there, both for feedback and also to see if we're on the right track. Like, is this the kind of thing that would be helpful for your policy? Or is it getting too much into the weeds? Do you need broader things, or do you need literally like, I have a whole list, a huge chart of like specific zones that can just, allow multifamily developments to be infilled into our neighborhoods. And so we've really tackled this, and we're just first drafts, and we'd love to get more feedback from people who are, in the know. And understand all the implications, and also you can tell us, this is overreaching or this is right on track, so.
I'd love to do that. Honestly, I would have come at 5 o'clock today, except that the official agenda said there was no public comment. So it didn't seem there was going to be an opportunity
Right.
to engage with you.
No, we felt like we needed just to sort
Which
of
is
get
fine.
into certain
Yeah.
specifics. But yeah, I think we might be at a point where we would really like a more broad discussion about specific things, if that makes any sense. But yeah, I think you in particular, and in some of our minutes, we're like, it'd be great if Mr. Hornet could attend.
Yeah.
So yeah, I won't go into my report now because I think that the zoning subcommittee meeting would be a good place for that. But yeah, we are definitely looking really carefully at an Amherst housing market study from 2015, just looking at their specific recommendations. Both of us have combed through it and pulled out the pieces that we have not done yet and could possibly do. And yeah, if anyone else wants to, if there's some particular aspect that, is interesting or you think can tackle, by all means, send us articles or write little, snippets or reports or something, because like David said, we're trying to pull together sort of this laundry list and get things ready so that when we can possibly present things to town council, the way we used to town meeting, maybe it's a way to just help things move forward for them, because I think they're still working on their process. So we're getting a little tired of waiting. So we're being a little more proactive. And so your housing policy definitely sort of got that going.
Great.
I had two questions. One is, what is the schedule that the Municipal Housing Trust is working on now to have this housing policy completed? There was a schedule discussed a few weeks ago, but I think it's changed. So it would be helpful for the planning board to know, when do you need comments from the planning board?
I guess there's a part of me that says as soon as possible, but thinking realistically about the progress for other groups, for example, the Community Preservation Act Committee has only had one very brief discussion of this. Nate Buddington had suggested maybe they would be able to take this up at a meeting at the very end of November. I don't know whether he's definitely scheduling that or not. The reason from their point of view is that they are now in the midst of a procurement cycle. And so they have, if they haven't already, I believe they have, they've put out a request for proposals or applications for CPA funding. And they expect for those to come in. There's probably a little bit of time at the end of November, beginning of December, before the proposals actually come in, when they can get back and start considering this. But they're on certainly a delayed schedule from what I might have anticipated. Again, the Finance Committee seems to be moving ahead. The Community Resource Committee is the group that took it up first. And I expect that they'll take it up again fairly soon. So we're probably looking at having feedback from those other groups sometime in early December. On the other hand, I wouldn't necessarily say that that's going to be final feedback. So is that helpful, Chris?
Chris?
It's helpful, and also we had discussed the planning board sending me comments, if you had specific comments about it, sending them to me, and then I would compile them. So you're welcome to do that if you feel moved to do that.
And if it could be things that are within the planning board purview, I think we all have wishes, but I'm just trying, so for comments to Chris, things that we could work on that could be included in the policy. And Janet?
So maybe addressing the question of purview, I don't think the planning board's purview is only zoning changes and tinkering, and I think that one thing I've been hearing and thinking about and hearing from people on the board and in meetings is, you can make a change, but how do you get it implemented? Or, a builder or a developer is building affordable housing, but then what's the next step? Like, how do they market it, and what are the problems to that? And so I'm really interested in, looking at, if we have an accessory house bylaw, like, okay, maybe we need to expand the square footage, but if we don't get that information out to the public of how to do that, or the fact that we've made that change, it doesn't really help that much. And so it seems like I'm thinking about problems, not just for like a person looking for affordable housing, but people who might want to build more housing, to what I think of as quantitative easing, that as we add more accessory units and apartments, it takes the pressure off the housing demand. And so you're kind of increasing density slowly in an organic way, and you're taking the pressure off the market. And, we'll have affordable units coming in, but there's more units that are affordable because there's more smaller infill and things. But to think about, there's an architect who's very interested in accessory units, and kind of like not in a Levittown kind of way, but he has he has a plan for what would be inexpensive and could be repeated over and over again, even to the point where how long the rooms are, so that you don't have to cut the wood, just fits in. So I think that the planning board, we can see like more needs, like putting more information on our website, or Barry Roberts is using Amherst Housing Authority, and maybe helping link that up a little bit, and kind of just identify what the problems are to implementation, not just zoning changes. Or
Well, a lot of what you just said, it dipped into areas of our purview and what we, density and.
So I think we have
zoning.
like a holistic view in a funny way.
I think I meant getting UMass to build more dorms, like that's, something someone else might want in the policy, but that, we can't do anything about that.
But I think
so.
the planning board could identify that as a need, that's one of the pressures on our housing market, is this continuing amount of students that come in without places to live, and puts pressure on Amherst. And so.
I guess I'm trying to make this easier and doable for us. Like, if we open up to everything that could be in their policy, then we're writing their policy and we're, trying to list. I think as individuals, if we have specific interest in this, which I know you do, we can work as individuals with your group and add more ideas and try to make the policy more robust and more complete. But I'm just trying to focus on, from us, that Chris will go and help us write a memo summary to, I only expect it to be a page or two at max, of just a listing of things that we're either working on, we'd like to work on, or we would hope that it would end up in our purview to adjust bylaw or zoning. Or, does that make sense, Chris?
I heard from some of you that you felt that the housing policy could use an executive summary, and that the way it's currently written is kind of long. So if the Housing Trust could put forth, a one-pager, like what really is this policy, and that would be easier for all the boards and committees that have to review it to respond to, and all the other information that's included in that document now could be an appendix, because it kind of bogs down reading it, and you want it to be a strong statement. So making a strong statement that's one page or one paragraph or whatever is useful would be more understandable for people, right?
That, for the policy, and that, because there's a lot of great stuff in it right now, great background, it sets the stage, but I assume that in the policy you want more specific to-dos and next steps, and that's where I'm hoping we can help you on that part that is within zoning and
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not quite sure what to do about the length. One of my favorite town councilors, Alyssa Brewer, said in her initial response to the policy, it's too long, you got to shorten it. And it may be the solution is to have, a page that represents a summary, but then not necessarily eliminate the rest of it, particularly if you do want it to say something.
right, well, or put it in addendum. Because it's great info, but it's pulling from other, it's not a summary of a lot of the information that's out there in different places, and you've managed to pull it together into one concise place and sets a background, but I know you want to beef this out and make it more specific and priorities so that it, it can be held, it will stand and it will grow. I don't know if, I had asked you if you had seen them, but I think it would help the board if they saw the comments from the town council on this.
So if well, I guess I could get them from the town council, but does the town council have comments yet, or are they waiting to hear from the FinCom and CPAC?
There are minutes that are posted from the discussions that have happened in the Finance Committee and the Community Resource Committee. So I think those would constitute the official discussion from town council to date.
Was there a memo yet from the CRC?
To be honest, I don't recall seeing one. I know I did my own summary after I met with them, but I have not looked to see if something has been posted subsequent to that. And I was going to get in touch with Mandy Jo to see.
I know there was a draft in the works. Maybe if you just check with Mandy Jo. Just because I think, they have a bigger, they'll approve all this after, us and everyone. But I think it would be a good starting place to look at. Yeah, Janet.
When I think of a policy statement or legal policy, it's like it is the policy of Congress to, ensure that people can live in affordable housing and to support, that kind of thing. And your policy is about making goals, specific, checking, making a plan, implementing it, reviewing it, and doing it, right? And so that could be a very general, and policies are legally enforceable. So, and so I think all the data and the information and the kind of arguments in support of it are really kind of explanation and supporting documentation. So the idea of just saying, what is it I want the town of Amherst to do over the next 5 years, and just focus on that. I mean, it's in there, but
Yeah.
The extra pages are really supporting pages or strategies that look great and we should be looking at.
Yeah, I hear that, and maybe we can work on that.
Yeah, I believe it's the Comprehensive Housing Market Study, the 2015 study, spoke to planning measures, or planning board measures that could be taken, and I thought it was a pretty good summary with bullets, and I'm wondering if that's something. You have something, Mark?
What we did, we looked at Chapter 6 recommendations and just went paragraph by paragraph and pulled out what we could use. And then both Jen and I have looked specifically at certain parts of our zoning and figured out what we can change for different zones. So yeah, we're actually getting into the weeds now, seeing, and we're going to flesh it out, vet it with the group, not just, in our own silo, but so yeah, it'd be great if you want to attend the next zoning subcommittee meeting, be part of it.
I will try, because I hate being the only one left out.
It's like the best. It makes for a long night, because we're on 5 hours right now, but it's a good time. It's rigorous or robust. What is it?
extra, or?
Yeah, you can have it.
Okay.
Oh, I don't know that one. So hopefully we'll see you at the next zoning sub
Unfortunately, I have a conflict on November 20th.
20th. Well,
But
work is going to be done, and we will send you something from that, and hopefully then at our meeting, we'll get a list, and Chris will be able to start working on them.
I mean, I appreciate your interest in the work that you're doing. I may talk to Rob Crowner and see if he would represent the Housing Trust on November 20th.
That would be great. We'd love to see him.
Good. Thank you.
We miss him. Thanks, John.
You're welcome.
So that was, oh heavens, where's the agenda? I think that was the end of new business, then we had old business, which, the new business is the Governor's Bill 3507. I think you all had that in your packet. It's getting really late, all I'll say is read it, especially the first, like, 5 pages. And I've followed up with some people to find out what the status of it is, and maybe I can report on that next time. For new business, items not anticipated, I think David had requested something.
I'd like to propose for the planning board's consideration and for discussion at a future meeting, whether it's November 20th or not. A lot of the meetings, we get a lot of material just before the meeting, and it's overwhelming and distracting. We can cite the 72-page memo we got last week, or the 5-page, but it's not just last week or the week before, it's often. And I'd like to propose, but again, for future discussion, that if we receive significant written materials, let's say less than 24 hours before a meeting for a scheduled agenda event, that we have sort of the option to hear what they have to say, what the applicants have to say, but that we don't have to consider that we have the option to continue. I know we do, but I'd like this just to be an explicit kind of pressure release valve. And so what I'd written, any matter before the planning board for which substantial materials are presented less than 24 hours before the scheduled meeting, the planning board may continue to study the materials at its discretion. There may be reasons to, there timeliness issues for the applicant. But I'd like us to discuss that in the future, for the future.
Janet?
I'd like to second that and beg you to discuss it. I'm sort of taken aback at how much late material comes in after the packets and how actually late I get the packet, so I really don't have time to consider it. And I would like to add to that the idea of deadlines. Lawyers know about deadlines, and so if you have a deadline, you meet it. And I would say, like, at some point, I know the planning department is getting barraged by stuff, and it just seems like very chaotic to me. And I'm looking around, I have 3 pieces of paper, and I'm not sure what I've read, and I'm very uncomfortable making decisions on something I haven't really reflected on. So I'd love to talk about timing and deadlines that aren't just 24 hours, but further back.
So I agree with a lot of the pain you feel, to the point where I actually met with Chris and Pam this week, trying to, at least for low-hanging fruit. I think, Chris sort of thought we got our packets on Saturday. I get mine out earliest Monday at 5, usually sometimes Tuesday at 5. So I was talking to them about at least anything that gets mailed out in the packet on Friday, if it could go up into the cloud in a folder of some type that we could access at 5 o'clock on Friday, so that then at least we have the weekend to start looking at things and digesting. And we had a site meeting this week on Monday at 9, and the truth was we were walking into it stone cold. We hadn't looked at anything, and it's hard to ask sharp questions and even know what you're looking for. And so they understand that. They have huge workloads, but I think small wins, that would at least be a start. So I know when I get my packet at 5 o'clock on Monday, and then more stuff is just piling on Tuesday and Wednesday. So I'm just hoping if on the back end we can start fixing the problem sooner rather than later, it will fix other things. And I agree, we'll put it on an agenda, and I hope Chris can think about it a little bit, because if it's bad for us, it's got to be even worse for you. So, and what kind of, at least disclosures or threats or whatever we can make to, in-house people, staff, because it's not just the developers or applicants that come, it's also in-house. How often are we waiting for a fire, department letter, or, a DPW letter, or things like that? So I hear you. So, and I've been thinking about it.
I was going to just add, also it'd be great to come to a hearing with all the materials that you've read days in advance, not, stringing things. This whole process is very chaotic, doesn't make that much sense to me. I could see like an occasional thing at the last minute, but I feel like I'd like to get it a week early, and I think if you tell the people looking for our permits and our permission, it has to come in early, so it's not chaos for you, and it can be put in an orderly way. And I'd be happy to pick up my packet on Friday, because I don't get it till like Monday, and then if I'm in a meeting or away, so I don't think it helps anybody.
Yeah. So with that, we'll add it on and we'll see what we can do. Thank you. Thanks, David. So 7, Form A&R subdivision applications. Please tell me no. Oh, geez, she's always got a gift. Okay.
In our application, and it's for property on Summer Street. It's two properties that are both non-conforming. The zoning district is RN, and neither property meets the requirements of the RN. So the person who owns both properties wants to put them together, so he has one lot that actually meets the zoning requirements. And I don't know if we have oh yes, we have a lovely locust plan that Pam created, and I'm going to pass it along to you. And it shows the two properties. These have been problematic as different people have bought them. They've thought they could develop the yellow property, and it turns out they can't. So here you go. And then I will ask Pam to walk past you with the drawings themselves.
Before Mr. Dintain. Mill Street, State Street. That's Papa Den.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So
Here's the new little bridge. Have you seen the new
okay,
little
so
bridge?
this is where I drive in this way, so, okay.
I think it'll be clear from looking at the drawing what's being proposed, that the middle property line is going away and the two lots are coming together.
There's a house there, but it's non-conforming.
Okay, so then
It's probably too close to the road is probably my guess. What is it? Is it too close to the road or?
Both lots are under 20,000 square feet, and I believe that neither one of them can hold the building circle, the 120-foot building circle. So, so the one lot was built on, the other lot wasn't. They probably met the zoning requirements back when the lots were created, but they don't anymore.
So what do they, so they put them together and they get their at least 20,000, and then what do they want to do with it?
Just want to have a conforming lot, and they may want to add to their house. I don't really know what their plans are for the future, but they'd like to have a conforming lot.
Zoning that doesn't help infill.
Yeah.
I'll sign it. I don't think they could split it, well, maybe if they do a supplemental, yeah.
Strangely enough, lots merge legally when they're non-conforming and they're next to each other and they're both owned by the same owner, but you actually have to go through the A&R process to prove it to the registry and everybody else. Yeah.
Then I definitely will sign that, so, all right.
Say that again, Chris?
So what I understand from the building commissioner is if two lots are adjacent to one another, and they're owned by the same owner for a period of time, whatever that is, then the lots legally merge. They can't have one without the other, but you have to still go through the A&R process to show that the lots are actually together.
I guess it's a legal thing. Well, is that it for A&R?
I think that's it, yep.
Oh, good. Number 8, upcoming ZBA applications. Pam?
Right, I have to do this, and I have to read these, so that was my homework. And then I have read the Charlie Baker thing, which I think
Because we hadn't done this for a while, I actually am not quite sure if you already know about these. But coming before ZBA on Thursday, November 14th, Pan Zen, who is requesting a special permit to modify an existing special permit and asking to remove a condition that requires the premises to be owner occupied. So, and this premise is at 321 Lincoln Ave. It's pretty straightforward. Chris, do you know if it's two-family?
Yes, it is. It's a two-family house. And when Mr. Tseng bought it, yeah, I think he bought it around the time that the rules changed with regard to owner-occupied versus non-owner-occupied two-family houses. So this one required a special permit, and it required it to be, didn't require, well, anyway, it was complicated. So he's trying to straighten it out now, and he doesn't want to live there, but he would still like to own it. So it'll become a non-owner-occupied two-family house. With a special permit from the ZBA.
So also coming before ZBA on November 14th is Mass Alternative Care. And they're requesting a special permit to modify an existing off-site medical marijuana dispensary. So they have to modify some conditions of that permit because they also are requesting a special permit for a recreational marijuana retailer to be co-located within that site. So that's at 55 University Drive.
Is that former bank building?
It's the former Hungry You, which was, yeah, then the Hungry You, maybe that's long ago. The hangar.
I was like, I don't know what that
The hangar that then moved to a different location, but it used to be the hangar.
And then I'll just mention one more, which is coming up on December 12th, and that is Yosrex Limited Partnership. They have an existing special permit that they're requesting an extension. This is at South Point Apartments, and they're thinking ahead. Their current special permit actually will expire. And so they are asking for an extension to begin the work after January 2020.
Yes, Chris.
This is an interesting one because I think they're adding 47 units altogether, and a certain percentage of those are going to be affordable. I forget exactly how many, but it's probably 12% of 47.
Great.
So
Wonderful.
Where's that? Where's that?
down on East Hadley Road.
Oh, that's right.
All right, thank you, Pam. Number 9, upcoming SPP, SPR, SUBs applications.
So the only one we know about right now is this request by Enterprise Rent-A-Car. They want to put a little tent behind their building. It's not really a tent, it's a more, permanent structure, but it looks like a tent. And the reason for it is that they want to be able to wash their cars and vacuum them and not be snowed on all winter long or rained on. And so that'll come to you sometime in December. I don't know if we've decided which date.
Jack?
Is it an awning?
It's one of those structures that you see in people's driveways that's kind of covered with a flexible material, and the structure itself is made out of metal poles. So it's really not a very, robust structure, but it's just enough to allow them to do what they propose to do.
Thank you.
But behind the building.
10, Planning Board Committee and Liaison Reports. It's so late, I'm just going to say, does anyone have a report that they want to make?
I have a report, but I don't want to make it.
Okay.
I have a request, though. I think that it's related to this. I understand, Christine, you'll know. Have, the parking consultant report, can we get an executive summary? That's my request.
Absolutely. So the Downtown Parking Working Group is actually meeting. They haven't met in a long time. The report is been delivered to town. There were comments from the town council, And we're meeting to like look at it, accept it, and at that time, I will request that you can get the whole report too, but you can, okay, you just want the executive, got it. It's really exciting, yeah, okay. All right. Anyone else have any requests about parking, what they want, or would an executive summary be good? Or maybe the introduction or the part that tells the goals that, I'll try to keep it as short as possible, but the good stuff. Okay. Yes, anyone else on that? Okay, and any other committee reports, liaison reports, nothing? We're good? Okay, so then report of the chair, I have nothing. Report of staff.
Thank you for the long night of hard work.
Yeah, we did get a lot done, though. An adjournment, do I hear a motion? And as we're doing that, thank you, Amherst Media.
I move to adjourn.
All in favor? Unanimous?